Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of Basra in Iraq. Basra, as you can see, is in the southeast corner of the country. It shares this long border with Kuwait, which is, of course, very important to its history and history of Iraq. And it also borders the Persian Gulf, which is also very important for Basra. Geographically, the most important aspect of this governorate is the Shat al-Arab, you can see right here. This is the river that is formed when the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet in the big marshy area over here and flows out as this long river which flows through the city of Basra. Otherwise, Basra's oil industry is, of course, very important. And this bay here is very important for Iraq's economy. And to be honest, there's not much else to say about geography, but that is okay because there's a lot to say about its history. So let's get into it. The city itself, Basra, was formed technically late in Iraq's history. If you consider that Iraq's history goes back to the dawn of civilization with Mesopotamia just up there, where the first farming communities, the first cities formed. The first in Mesopotamia. And I already have a lot of videos about that. I'll link my Iraq playlist right up there so you can learn a lot more about Mesopotamia and other parts of Iraq, like the capital city, Baghdad. But anyway, so yeah, pretty late in the history of Iraq, considering how far back the history goes. It was created in the year 638 CE, and it was created to be a military post here in this kind of middle area between the marshy wetland confluence of the two rivers and the Persian Gulf down here. There was a famous battle here in the year 656 known as the Battle of the Camel, which was a conflict between Prophet Muhammad's widow, Aisha, and the fourth Caliph Ali, who was also Muhammad's son-in-law and cousin, and essentially the founder of the Shia sect of Islam. Ali would win out, by the way. I just thought it was an interesting battle name, the Battle of the Camel. A great battle name, I suppose. The highlight of Basra's existence would have been during the reign of the Abbasid Caliphate, whose capital was up in Baghdad. A lot of pros and cons during that time. There were a lot of very interesting uprisings and conflicts in Basra during this time. Between 869 and 883, there was an uprising of the Zinj, which were the African slaves in the area. It's also where we get the word for Zanzibar. It's from the Zinj, since they were Bantu people from kind of centralish Africa. But there are a lot of interesting different uprisings and revolts at that time. But for the most part, Basra was a city of culture and creativity and learning. And since it's mentioned in every source that I found, so I gotta mention it, Basra is mentioned in the 1001 Nights, the story of Sinbad the sailor. He set sail on his adventures to sail the seven seas from Basra. The glory days of not just Basra, but the whole area here was ended very abruptly in the year 1258 when the Mongols invaded, and they essentially sacked Basra and very famously Baghdad, which I've already talked about. They very famously sacked all the cities here in the area, and they never ever recovered to their former glory of just thriving cities, many scholars, and like, you know what I'm trying to say. Just cities of education and knowledge, I suppose. The area was under the control of the Safavid Persians for quite a while, and for a brief moment, even the Portuguese. When in 1668, Basra was invaded by the Ottomans, and it went back and forth a bit between the Safavids and the Ottomans, but the Ottomans had very firm control, and that would last until the end of World War I, when the British took over what's now today known as Iraq. They called it the Mandate of Mesopotamia. Essentially, since the Ottoman Empire crumbled after World War I, the French and the British divvied up different lands to temporarily control. The British held, as they called it, Mesopotamia, until about 10 years later when the Kingdom of Iraq was formed, which very famously would fall and come under the control of a dictator named Saddam Hussein, which we're going to mention briefly when we head to the tablet, so keep that in mind. Basra suffered some heavy damage during the Iraq-Iran war, I assume because it was pretty easy for Iran to bomb cities, since Iran's literally right here. I should have mentioned that too, border with Iran right here. There was also lots of conflict during the Gulf War when Iraq invaded Kuwait down here. I told you that would come up. The people here very aggressively protested the invasion since they were right in the midst of everything happening, and the Iraqi government retaliated very harshly. About a decade later, during the Iraq War, when the coalition would invade Iraq, the first place they invaded was Basra. There's a very large battle there called the Battle of Basra. Not a great battle name, not very creative, 0 out of 10. Not to make light of it, but it was the first city that the coalition forces fully controlled in their invasion of Iraq and their overthrow of Saddam Hussein. Obviously, it was quite turbulent during and not long after those times. Thankfully, Basra didn't have to deal with many of the violence and insurrections and, you know what I'm talking about, unsafe for YouTube happenings that occurred in the rest of Iraq. But some other interesting conflicts have come up in Basra in recent years. One of them has to do with electricity. Since during the summer, as you can imagine, it gets extremely hot here. I think I read like 50 degrees Celsius during the summer. Electricity is a bit iffy. And even last year, I believe in 2023, there was a fire at a power station here in Basra that cut the electricity for most of the country. It was that bad. But the main issue has to do with the water quality here in Basra. In 2018 in particular, there were many cases of diseases caused by water contamination. And it's an ongoing issue, mainly due to the water quality in the Shat al-Arab, where most people get their water from. But it's an ongoing situation that's being monitored and treated so that hopefully someday soon it won't be such a bad issue. I know there's water treatment plants and things in Basra now, so Hopefully, this will be a thing of the past. Today, I saw many tourist websites saying that Basra is the best city to visit for tourists, and people there are extremely welcoming and kind. Iraq in general, in the past, 5 years, has been very open to tourists and very welcoming and accommodating for tourists. So, when we look at the tablet and you think, oh, cool, I want to see some of this stuff, feel free to book your flight. Because apparently, people here are very excited to welcome you here, which is awesome. It's what we like to see on this channel. Peace and happiness, especially in areas that did not see those things for a long time. That is a very brief history of Basra. Like I always say, I did skip over and gloss over a lot of aspects of Basra's history. If you think there was an instance that I absolutely should have mentioned, please feel free to drop it down in the comments and I'll pin it. I can only pin one at a time, so if too many of you leave amazing comments, I'm sorry, I can only do one at a time. But yeah, I don't go into too much detail of history of places on this channel. So yeah, that's why it's not as concise as other histories. I'm going to stop rambling. I don't need to make excuses. It's my channel. I'll do what I want. I hope you enjoyed the history of Basra. Now, let's head over to the tablet. And we're going to take a look at some of the sites, mainly in the city here, but around the region. Here we are in Basra Governorate. Let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. So here you can see Iraq. You can see very easy from space because you can see the fertile valley of Mesopotamia from space here. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers creating this lush valley here, with Basra being right at the edge of it. Here's the Persian Gulf, or in some parts of the world they call it the Arabian Gulf. If you want to leave angry comments about how I didn't say Arabian Gulf, I suppose you can do that if you want. But yeah, it's either or, to be honest. And you can really see from above just how wet this area is. You know, you think Iraq, you think barren desert, but that's not true for most of the country. Sadly, this area used to be a lot more wetter and very famously marshier. Saddam Hussein purposefully drained a lot of the marshy areas because there is a people known as the Marsh Arabs, and he was trying to destroy their lifestyle. He was not a great guy. It really dawned on me while researching this that some of you watching this were probably not even born when Saddam Hussein was captured and executed, which is wild to me. But you gotta think that was 20 years ago, you know? A lot has changed since then. Let's start here at the Basra Cultural Museum, here on the shores of the river. Really pretty building here. And they did a great job with the color schemes here as well. Here's the red room. Really famous recreation of a statue from Babylon there. I guess this is the jewel-toned room. The artifacts there. Beautiful ceiling here, of course. And some flags from other, I guess, Gulf countries there. The green room. The orange room. It's pretty. It's a gorgeous museum. And of course, many amazing artifacts from long, long ago. Old Mesopotamian, Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, what have you. This looks like a bathtub. Maybe it is. All kinds of artifacts, I'm sure, are on display here from many of those times. Oh, little raging lion there. Goodness, these look like little, like you could see the clay here and these little rollers making the pattern. That's really neat. It's a really gorgeous museum here. See, that's the Assyrian gallery. Really beautiful museum. That's a must-see, in my opinion, if you're going to visit Basra. I guess the one thing I really wanted to make sure that I showed you is out here on the river. I think it's over here. Yes. There are many ships, as you can see out here. I think there's a good example over here, just kind of rotting away in the water. Just rusting away, as you can see over here. Ships from a previous time, from a previous era, and there's no better example than Al Mansour. Look at this guy. Capsized, all listed, and rusting over. So what is this ship doing here? This is actually or was, I should say, it's no more, obviously, a yacht that was owned by Saddam Hussein. And here's what it looked like once upon a time, this huge, beautiful luxury yacht. And there's a picture in this slideshow of what it looked like after the coalition forces set it on fire by bombing it. And it just kind of floated in the water ever since and eventually rolled over and is now rusting away. So one of Saddam's legacies here just rotted away. There's also different palaces here in town that he made and I'm sure barely stayed at that are also looted and destroyed and rusted away. Here's the corniche, the kind of, I guess, the boardwalk area. The luxury, cool riverside part of town. I like this sign. Bridge all lit up beautifully at night. I think the best pictures I've seen of Basra are at night. The city's beautifully illuminated. They dressed up this little boy. He doesn't look too happy about it. But yeah, it's, we can ride on some fun rides. I'm sure there's some wonderful shopping, get some good fruit and snacks, and here entertainment. There's water shows. Beautiful. Get a boat ride, get a boat tour down the river, see some of the famous sights in the city. Gorgeous, am I right? And yeah, just look how massive this city is. I know I did the same thing in Baghdad where it's just like, holy moly, this city is huge. It's a big one. Big old canal there by the looks of it. Big and thriving city, and you can see, you know, as we travel down the river, all of the farmland here, probably growing dates and fruits and wonderful things. As we head out, you can see the border there with Iran. Head out to the Persian Gulf. Pretty fascinating, am I right? I also found, where is it? I need to zoom out, make sure I'm not lost. It was on the border with Kuwait here, this town. Another busy little thriving town here. And then as you can see on the border, nothing, but you can see what once was, can't you? So this is either because there was a city here and it got invaded by Iraq and bombed out of existence. There's a little farming area there, some kind. But you can see where all the roads and things once were, can't you? It could also be because this town, I believe it was this town, once Iraq invaded Kuwait, they were like, go ahead and move in. We own it now. And people did. And then obviously once the Gulf War came to a head, you had to abruptly move out. So here's the border area. If you want to cross over to Kuwait. In like the most barren part of Kuwait in the desert. But you certainly can. Take a long bus ride over to Kuwait City if you want from here. And as you can see, the rest is pretty desolate. Let's highlight the borders here again so we don't wind up somewhere else, even though that'd probably be pretty hard to do. So I feel like this, when people think, describe Iraq's landscape, people think of this, just dry desert sands, right? But that's not entirely true for a lot of Iraq, as you can see. Look at all these. Or I wonder if we can see. Whoop. Some really lush farms here. I believe there's lots of aquaculture as well. But I don't remember where I saw those kinds of farms. Maybe it's just Google Earth's images. But yeah, these lush wet areas provide great farmland, as they have done, like I said, since the dawn of time, since the beginning of humanity. Let's look at this marsh here. Let's see, for many places here in Iraq, this is the landscape. So get that notion out of your head that it's like a mostly desert. That's like Syria or Jordan is mostly desert. Iraq has a lot of desert, but also has a lot of not desert at all. Lots of beautiful places here. You can see even this island is super busy. Looks like lots of industry there. A little park. Do you think it has a slideshow? It sure does. Isn't that beautiful? Holy moly. That's gorgeous. So yeah, beautiful, thriving city. There's the Prophet, peace be unto him, mosque. I'm sure that's just a bad translation, but not a bad name. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I really wanted to show you. I think that was about it. Why don't we try to find something fun to close out this video with? Let's put on the everything filter and find someplace cool. Not a shoe store, but like somewhere interesting. Not the car wash. How about this little farmy area over here? Nope. Aha. Here we go. Let's see what's in this slideshow as I close out the video. It's geese, apparently. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. This is an ongoing series on my channel, and next we're going to be heading over to the Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, and I'm going to show you the places where most likely your favorite chocolate begins. We're going to the cacao or cocoa producing region of Ivory Coast, where companies like Cadbury and Nestle and Hershey's get their cocoa from. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. If you learned something cool in this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you learned down in the comments. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good night.